Money doesn't reveal who people are, Adrian Castellano once said as he stared across the glowing Manhattan skyline from the 72nd floor of the Romano Grand Hotel. It just removes the mask. And on that cold November night, beneath crystal chandeliers and the soft sound of live jazz drifting through a ballroom filled with New York's elite, the most feared businessman in the city was about to prove his theory in front of everyone. The annual Castellano Foundation Charity Gala glittered with diamonds, champagne glasses, designer gowns, and practiced smiles. Politicians laughed too loudly beside Wall Street investors. Socialites posed near marble columns while photographers chased the perfect shot. Everything in the room screamed wealth, power, perfection. But Adrian sat alone at the center table looking completely untouched by any of it. His charcoal tuxedo fit like armor against his broad frame, his silver watch catching flashes of candlelight each time he lifted his glass. Women watched him constantly, drawn by the dangerous calm that surrounded him like invisible smoke. At 38 years old, Adrian Castellano had built an empire powerful enough to make senators answer his phone calls within seconds. But tonight, his attention wasn't on business deals or charity speeches. Tonight he was studying people, especially women. "You really doing this?" his longtime friend Vincent muttered beside him, loosening his bow tie with amusement. Adrian's cold blue eyes moved slowly across the ballroom. "Every person in this room claims they value honesty," he said quietly. "I'm curious how much honesty survives temptation." Vincent laughed under his breath. "You sound like a priest with a bank account." Adrian reached inside his jacket and placed a sleek black card on the white tablecloth. Conversations nearby immediately slowed. Even from several feet away, people recognized it. The infamous unlimited black card, attached to one of the most exclusive financial accounts in America. Rumors about Adrian's spending followed him everywhere. Multi-million-dollar penthouses, private islands, seven-figure watches bought like groceries. The card itself almost felt mythical. Adrian leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. "Tonight," he announced calmly enough for nearby tables to overhear, "I want to see what people choose when there are no limits." The tension shifted instantly. Three glamorous women seated near the VIP section exchanged interested looks before slowly approaching his table. One was a luxury fashion influencer wrapped in silver silk. Another was the daughter of a real estate billionaire with diamonds shining around her neck. The third smiled with the polished confidence of someone who had spent her entire life around rich men. Adrian barely reacted as they surrounded him. "Anything we want?" the woman in silver asked teasingly, her manicured fingers brushing the edge of the black card. Adrian gave a faint nod. "Anything." Excitement flickered across their faces like fire catching gasoline. Nearby guests pretended not to stare while secretly listening to every word. The women immediately began talking over each other about watches, vacations, handbags, and exotic cars. One joked about buying a yacht before midnight. Another laughed about replacing her entire wardrobe by sunrise. Adrian listened silently, his expression growing emptier with every sentence. Then, while champagne sparkled and laughter echoed beneath golden light, his eyes drifted away from the women entirely, toward the far side of the ballroom, toward the quiet young maid replacing linen napkins near the service station. Naomi Carter moved carefully through the crowd in a simple black uniform, almost invisible beside the luxury surrounding her. Her natural curls were tied neatly behind her head, and her tired brown eyes stayed focused on her work as she collected empty glasses one by one. She never glanced at the black card. Not once. And for the first time that night, Adrian Castellano stopped pretending to be entertained. The game spread through the ballroom within minutes. Wealthy guests gathered closer to Adrian's table pretending to socialize while secretly waiting to see how far the night would go. The woman in silver silk returned first, smiling triumphantly as a sales associate from the luxury boutique downstairs carried 3 velvet boxes behind her. "Limited edition," she said proudly, opening one of the boxes to reveal a diamond bracelet sparkling beneath the chandelier light. "Only 2 exist in the city." Adrian barely glanced at it. "Do you like it?" she asked. "I like honesty," he replied calmly. Her smile faltered for half a second before she recovered with another laugh. Across the room, The billionaire's daughter posed for photos beside a brand new imported sports car parked dramatically inside the hotel entrance. Guests applauded while cameras flashed non-stop. The third woman had become more strategic. Instead of shopping immediately, she stayed close to Adrian's side, touching his arm lightly whenever she spoke, laughing at every sentence as though he were the most fascinating man alive. Vincent watched the entire performance with growing amusement. "You were right," he muttered under his breath. "Nobody even tried to hide it." Adrian swirled the amber liquid in his glass slowly, but his attention drifted again toward the service corridor near the ballroom kitchen. Naomi moved quietly between tables carrying silver trays heavier than they looked. While the women competed for Adrian's attention beneath golden light and expensive perfume, Naomi wiped spilled wine from a marble floor where a waiter had accidentally slipped moments earlier. No complaints. No dramatic sighs. Just silent work. "You keep staring at the maid," Vincent noticed. Adrian did not answer immediately. Instead, he watched Naomi kneel briefly beside an elderly dishwasher seated near the staff entrance. The older man looked pale, exhausted. Naomi handed him half of the sandwich she had wrapped carefully in a napkin for herself. "You need to eat something, Mr. Lewis," she said softly. "You skipped lunch again." The old man smiled weakly. "And what about you?" Naomi shrugged lightly. "I will be okay." Then she stood immediately as the ballroom manager approached, barking instructions at the staff. "Table 12 needs fresh champagne now," the manager snapped impatiently. Naomi apologized even though the delay had not been her fault and hurried away carrying 2 heavy silver buckets filled with ice. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. Most people in the ballroom never notice workers unless something went wrong. But he noticed everything. That was how men like him survived. "You know what your problem is?" Vincent said while adjusting his cufflinks. "You are looking for sincerity in a room designed for performance." Adrian leaned back slowly. "No," he replied quietly. "I am looking for someone who does not change when money enters the room." At that exact moment, one of the glamorous women returned breathless from another shopping spree. "Adrian, look what I found," she said excitedly while displaying a luxury watch covered in diamonds. It cost almost $100,000. Nearby guests gasped softly in admiration. Adrian looked at the watch for 2 silent seconds before asking, "And did buying it make you happy?" The woman blinked, confused by the question. "Of course." Adrian's expression remained unreadable. Across the ballroom, Naomi accidentally brushed against a guest while carrying crystal glasses. Red wine splashed lightly onto the woman's designer gown. The room instantly shifted. The guest spun around with sharp irritation flashing across her face. "Are you serious?" she snapped loudly enough for surrounding tables to hear. Naomi froze immediately, her voice calm but apologetic. "I am so sorry, ma'am. Let me help clean it." But the woman stepped back with visible disgust. "Do you even know how much this dress costs?" The music continued softly in the background, but several conversations nearby faded into silence. Naomi lowered her eyes respectfully. "I apologize, ma'am." The guest scoffed coldly. "People like you should not even be allowed near events like this." And from the center table beneath the chandelier light, Adrian Castellano slowly set down his glass. The ballroom fell into that rare kind of silence money could not control. The offended woman stood frozen in her shimmering designer gown, still glaring at Naomi as though a few drops of wine had personally insulted her existence. Naomi kept her head lowered politely, her hands trembling only slightly around the silver tray she still carried. "I said people like you should not be working around guests," the woman repeated louder this time, making sure nearby tables heard every word. Several people shifted uncomfortably. Others pretended not to notice. That was how high society often handled cruelty. Ignore it long enough and eventually it becomes normal. Naomi swallowed quietly. "I truly apologize, ma'am. I can pay for the cleaning." The woman laughed sharply. "Pay for it? Sweetheart, this dress costs more than your yearly salary." A few uncomfortable chuckles escaped from nearby guests desperate to stay on the right side of wealth and status. Naomi nodded once, accepting the humiliation with a quiet dignity that somehow made the moment feel even uglier. Then Adrian Castellano rose from his chair. The movement alone changed the atmosphere instantly. Conversations stopped. Even the musicians near the stage seemed to lose confidence in their notes. Adrian adjusted the cuff of his tuxedo slowly before walking across the ballroom floor with calm, measured steps. Nobody spoke as he approached. The woman's expression transformed immediately when she saw him coming. Her irritation melted into flirtatious embarrassment. "Adrian, I was only saying she needs to be more careful." Adrian stopped beside Naomi first, not the guest. Close, he noticed details others missed. The faint exhaustion beneath Naomi's eyes. The tiny scar near her wrist. The careful way she held herself still despite being publicly humiliated. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. Naomi looked startled that he had addressed her at all. "No, sir." Adrian nodded once before finally turning toward the woman in the stained gown. "How much did you say the dress cost?" The woman smiled nervously. "About $30,000. Adrian reached into his jacket, removed the black card, and placed it gently on the tray Naomi was still holding. Gasps moved through the ballroom like wind through leaves. "Then buy another one," he said calmly. The woman blinked in confusion before realizing he was not speaking to her. Adrian's cold blue eyes remained fixed on Naomi. "Use the card." Naomi stared down at the black card resting against polished silver. For the first time all evening she looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Sir, I cannot." "Cannot?" Adrian asked softly. "Or will not?" The room watched breathlessly. Even Vincent leaned forward now. Naomi carefully lifted the card with both hands as though it did not belong anywhere near her. "It is not mine," she answered simply. Adrian studied her face closely. Most people reacted to wealth with excitement, greed, or desperation. Naomi looked almost saddened by it. "If I gave you permission," he pressed. Naomi hesitated. Around them, the three glamorous women from earlier watched with visible irritation. One crossed her arms impatiently while another whispered something bitter beneath her breath. Adrian ignored all of them. "Anything you want," he repeated. "No limits." Naomi's fingers tightened slightly around the black card. For a brief second, Adrian thought he finally saw temptation flicker across her tired face. But when she spoke, her voice remained soft and steady. "Then I would probably buy insulin." Silence. Complete and immediate. Adrian's expression changed almost invisibly. "Insulin." Naomi nodded faintly. "For my mother." Nobody laughed this time. The woman in the stained dress suddenly looked very small standing beneath the chandelier light. Naomi lowered her eyes again and carefully placed the black card back onto the tray. "But she already skips her medication to save money," Naomi continued quietly. "So she would probably be angry if I spent that much." Adrian stared at her without speaking. Around them, crystal glasses sparkled beneath golden light while 1,000 expensive things filled the room. But for the first time that night, none of it felt impressive anymore. The gala continued, but the energy inside the ballroom had shifted in a way nobody could fully explain. Music still floated softly beneath the chandeliers. Champagne still sparkled in crystal glasses. Wealthy guests still smiled for cameras and shook hands beside marble pillars. Yet after Naomi's quiet answer, the luxury surrounding them suddenly felt hollow, like a beautiful stage hiding something empty underneath. Adrian returned slowly to his table, but his attention never fully left the young maid moving silently between guests. Every few minutes, his eyes found her again. Naomi never tried to approach him afterward, never lingered near his section, never acted differently because of what had happened. If anything, she became even quieter. That unsettled him more than greed ever could. Most people changed the second they sensed opportunity. Naomi acted as though she wished the entire moment had never happened. "You are thinking too hard again," Vincent muttered while loosening his tie. Adrian ignored him. Across the ballroom, the three glamorous women who had surrounded Adrian earlier were growing visibly frustrated. One returned carrying another expensive shopping bag as though trying to reclaim his attention. Another laughed loudly at stories Adrian was not listening to. The third finally leaned closer and whispered, "You cannot seriously be interested in a maid." Adrian turned his cold gaze toward her slowly enough to make her regret speaking. "Interesting people are rare," he replied calmly. "Expensive things are not." The woman fell silent immediately. Meanwhile, Naomi slipped quietly through the service doors leading toward the hotel kitchen. The moment the heavy doors closed behind her, the warmth and glamour of the ballroom disappeared. Bright white kitchen lights replaced candlelight. Steam rose from industrial sinks. Staff members rushed between counters carrying trays and stacks of plates while exhausted cooks shouted orders over the noise. Naomi moved through the chaos with practiced calm. She set down her tray, rolled up her sleeves slightly, and immediately began helping another waitress clean broken glass near the dishwasher station. "You okay?" the waitress whispered softly. Naomi nodded once. "I am fine." But she was not fine. Humiliation had a way of staying inside the body long after words ended. She could still hear the laughter from the ballroom echoing faintly in her ears. She moved toward her locker near the back hallway and quietly opened the small metal door. Inside sat a folded gray sweater, an old family photograph, and a pharmacy receipt tucked carefully beside a nearly empty bottle of insulin. Naomi stared at it for a moment before closing her eyes. Briefly, her mother's medication refill was already 4 days overdue. "Naomi." She looked up quickly as Mr. Lewis, the elderly dishwasher from earlier, approached slowly with concern written across his tired face. "You should not let people speak to you that way." Naomi gave a small smile that did not fully reach her eyes. "People like them do not even remember tomorrow what they said tonight." Mr. Lewis shook his head sadly. "Still does not make it right." Before Naomi could answer, the kitchen suddenly quieted. Staff members straightened instinctively. Footsteps approached down the hallway with calm, measured confidence. Adrian Castellano entered the kitchen wearing the same immaculate tuxedo, looking completely out of place beneath fluorescent lights and stainless steel counters. Every employee froze immediately. A chef nearly dropped an entire tray of desserts. Adrian's presence carried the same effect everywhere he went. Not because he raised his voice, because he never needed to. His blue eyes moved across the room before finally landing on Naomi beside her locker. "I need a word with you," he said quietly. Naomi's fingers tightened slightly around the pharmacy receipt still in her hand. Around them nobody moved. Nobody breathed too loudly. The kitchen felt suddenly smaller somehow, as though all the air had shifted toward the space between the billionaire in the tuxedo and the exhausted maid standing beneath cold white light. Adrian noticed the orange prescription bottle near the locker door. Then he looked back at Naomi. "How long has your mother been sick?" he asked softly. And for the first time all night, Adrian Castellano sounded less like a man testing people, and more like a man searching for something he had lost years ago. Naomi glanced briefly around the kitchen as though searching for permission to answer honestly. Every employee nearby suddenly found reasons to stay busy. Pots clattered softly. Water rushed through industrial sinks. But nobody dared interrupt the silence stretching between the billionaire in the tailored tuxedo and the maid standing beside the dented gray locker. Naomi lowered her eyes again. "About 6 years," she answered. Quietly, Adrian noticed how carefully she chose each word, like someone accustomed to surviving by never saying too much. "Type 1 diabetes?" he asked. Naomi looked surprised. "Yes, sir." Adrian nodded faintly. "My younger sister had it." The words landed heavily in the sterile kitchen air. Vincent once claimed Adrian Castellano spoke less about his family than he spoke about federal taxes. Most people in New York did not even know he had once had a sister. Naomi looked up slightly then, curiosity flickering across her tired face before disappearing just as quickly. Adrian's gaze drifted toward the nearly empty insulin bottle beside the folded pharmacy receipt. "How much is the refill?" Naomi hesitated. "Too much." "That was not my question." She swallowed softly. $480 this month. Adrian stared at the bottle without speaking. $480. Men in his ballroom upstairs had spent more than that tonight on wine they barely tasted. "Why did not you use the card?" he asked finally. Naomi looked genuinely confused. "Sir, you could have taken it," Adrian said quietly. "Nobody would have stopped you." Naomi shook her head immediately. "That would not have made it mine." Adrian studied her face carefully, almost searching for deception hidden beneath exhaustion. He had spent years around people who lied beautifully. Business executives, politicians, models, investors, lovers. Every one of them wanted something eventually. Money had taught him to expect performance from everyone. But Naomi spoke with the calm simplicity of someone who had stopped expecting life to be fair a long time ago. "You really would have bought medicine?" he asked. "Not clothes? Not jewelry?" Naomi glanced down at her worn black shoes briefly before answering. "Pretty things stop mattering when someone you love cannot afford to stay healthy." The kitchen fell silent again. Somewhere deeper inside the hotel, music from the ballroom drifted faintly through the walls like another world entirely. Adrian leaned slightly against the stainless steel counter beside him. "And your father?" Naomi smiled faintly, but there was sadness inside it. "He passed away when I was 14. So it is just you and your mother? And my younger brother." Adrian noticed how her expression softened immediately at the mention of him. "Malcolm," she continued quietly. "He is 19. Engineering student at Columbia." Adrian raised an eyebrow slightly. "That is expensive." Naomi gave a tired little laugh. "Very. Yet you still pay for it." "He is smart enough to leave this life behind." Adrian looked at her for a long moment after she said that. Leave this life behind. The words unsettled him unexpectedly, because Naomi herself spoke as though she had already accepted she never would. Before Adrian could respond, one of the chefs hurried nervously into the hallway carrying a silver tray of desserts. He nearly slipped on the wet tile floor. Instinctively, Naomi reached out quickly to steady the tray before it crashed. Chocolate mousse glasses rattled dangerously before settling safely back into place. "Careful," she said softly. The chef exhaled shakily. "Thank you." Adrian noticed something then. Naomi helped people automatically. Not dramatically. Not performatively. The same way other people breathed without thinking. And suddenly, for the first time in years, Adrian Castellano felt deeply uncomfortable inside his own expensive skin. Because standing beneath cold fluorescent lights beside a tired woman with worn shoes and an empty wallet, he realized something terrifying. Naomi Carter possessed something he had spent his entire adult life failing to buy. The ballroom looked even brighter when Adrian returned from the kitchen, but now the luxury irritated him instead of impressing him. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors while guests continued laughing over champagne and expensive desserts, completely unaware that something inside the most powerful man in the room had shifted. Adrian moved back toward the VIP section with the calm posture everyone expected from him, yet his thoughts remained trapped beside a dented gray locker and a nearly empty insulin bottle. "There he is," one of the glamorous women said immediately, rising from her chair with a smile polished enough for magazine covers. "We were wondering if your little employee crisis was over." Adrian looked at her silently for a moment before sitting down. The woman mistook his silence for interest and leaned closer. "You know," she continued softly, "girls like that can get manipulative when rich men pay attention to them." Vincent nearly winced at the sentence. Adrian's blue eyes lifted slowly. "Girls like what?" The woman laughed lightly, unaware she was already losing. "You know what I mean. Sad stories. Sick relatives. It is practically a script at this point." Adrian stared at her long enough for discomfort to replace confidence on her face. "Interesting," he said quietly. "Because all night I have only seen one group of people performing." The table fell silent immediately. Nearby guests pretended not to listen while listening to every word. Adrian reached for the black card resting beside his glass and held it between his fingers thoughtfully. For years that card had functioned almost like a weapon. Not because of what it could buy, but because of what it revealed. People exposed themselves around unlimited money, desperation, vanity, ambition, greed. Adrian had watched it happen hundreds of times, including with the woman he once planned to marry. 3 years earlier, he had overheard her laughing on a yacht in Monaco while telling friends she would never love him, only the life attached to his name. Adrian remembered standing alone beneath white lights and ocean wind listening to the woman he trusted describe him as an investment. After that night, he stopped believing sincerity existed in wealthy rooms. "Adrian," Vincent interrupted carefully. "You all right?" Adrian blinked once, pulling himself back into the present. Across the ballroom, Naomi had returned quietly to work as though none of the evening's events involved her at all. She carried fresh coffee toward an elderly couple seated near the back corner. Adrian watched her smile gently while adjusting the older woman's chair before pouring the coffee with careful hands. No cameras pointed at her. No wealthy guests applauded her kindness. She did it anyway. The realization settled heavily inside his chest. Naomi was the same person, whether anyone watched or not. One of the glamorous women suddenly slid a jewelry catalog across the table toward Adrian. "There is actually something I wanted to ask you," she said sweetly. Adrian glanced down briefly at the circled diamond necklace worth nearly $500,000. The woman smiled expectantly. Adrian closed the catalog without emotion and handed it back. No, her smile froze instantly. "Excuse me." Adrian leaned back slowly in his chair. "Tonight was educational," he replied calmly. "And I think I finally understand the difference between luxury and value." Across the room, Naomi accidentally dropped a spoon while clearing dishes. She bent quickly to pick it up, apologizing softly to the guests nearby. Adrian watched the small moment carefully. No arrogance. No entitlement. Just humility so natural it almost hurt to witness. Then something unexpected happened. Naomi reached into the pocket of her apron and quietly handed folded cash to a young valet standing near the service hallway. The teenager looked embarrassed. "Miss Carter, I cannot take this." "Your daughter needs the inhaler," Naomi whispered gently. "Take it." Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. The money she handed away was probably part of what little she had left for herself. Yet she gave it away without hesitation. The jazz music continued softly beneath golden light, while wealthy guests discussed stock markets and vacation homes around them. But Adrian no longer heard any of it. Because for the first time in years, something far more dangerous than greed had entered the room. A woman with almost nothing had reminded him what real wealth looked like. By midnight, the gala had started to thin out. Luxury cars lined the hotel entrance while wealthy guests disappeared into elevators laughing softly beneath the fading sound of jazz music. Waiters carried half-empty champagne glasses back toward the kitchen. Floral arrangements worth thousands of dollars slowly wilted beneath the ballroom lights. The performance was ending. But Adrian Castellano remained seated alone at the center table long after most guests had left. The black card still rested untouched beside his hand. Across the ballroom, Naomi carefully folded linen napkins into a silver cart, while the remaining staff cleaned around her. Her movements had slowed now. Exhaustion settled visibly into her shoulders, yet she continued working without complaint. Adrian watched her quietly. For years he had surrounded himself with people who demanded attention. Naomi somehow stood out by asking for none at all. "You are still here?" Vincent asked while slipping on his coat. Adrian nodded faintly. "Go home." Vincent studied his friend carefully for a moment. "You know this is dangerous for you." Adrian looked up slowly. "What is?" Vincent gave a small humorless smile. "Meeting someone who reminds you that you still have a heart." Adrian said nothing, because the truth was already unsettling enough without hearing it spoken aloud. After Vincent left, the ballroom became quieter. The enormous chandeliers dimmed slightly as hotel staff began shutting sections of the venue down one by one. Naomi moved toward the stage carrying a small trash bag filled with crumpled programs and used decorations. She stopped briefly beside one of the centerpieces where several white roses had fallen onto the tablecloth. Carefully, she picked up the flowers and separated the undamaged ones from the rest. Adrian watched curiously as she wrapped the surviving roses gently in a napkin instead of throwing them away. "Most people would toss those out," he said suddenly from behind her, though there was no humor inside it. "Most people take care of themselves first." Naomi lowered her eyes briefly. "That must be nice." The sentence landed softly between them, but Adrian felt it anyway. He noticed then how pale she looked beneath the ballroom lights. "Have you eaten tonight?" he asked. Naomi hesitated just long enough to answer the question without words. Adrian glanced toward the untouched dessert still sitting near the VIP table. "Sit down," he said calmly. "Sir, I still have work to finish." That was not a request. Naomi looked uncertain, but exhaustion finally defeated pride. Slowly, she sat across from him at the massive table where millionaires and celebrities had gathered only hours earlier. Adrian pushed a plate holding a slice of chocolate cake toward her. Naomi stared at it awkwardly. I cannot eat your food. Adrian looked at her steadily. Naomi. It was the first time he had spoken her name without formality. Something in his voice made her stop resisting. Quietly, she picked up the fork and took a small bite. Adrian watched the tension slowly soften from her face, as genuine hunger replaced hesitation. Then his eyes drifted toward her hands. Her fingers were rough from years of work. Tiny scars crossed her knuckles. One thumbnail was cracked near the edge. Hands that had spent a lifetime surviving instead of resting. Something tightened painfully inside his chest. Unexpected. Sharp. Human. Light, unable to shake the strange heaviness growing inside him. Naomi finished the last small bite of cake carefully, almost apologetically, as though even hunger needed permission in rooms like this. Adrian watched her place the fork down gently beside the empty plate. Thank you, she said softly. Nobody had thanked him sincerely for anything in a very long time. Not for gifts. Not for favors. Not even for loyalty. Gratitude around Adrian usually came wrapped in ambition. Naomi's did not. The silence between them settled comfortably for a moment before Naomi glanced toward the ballroom entrance. I should finish cleaning before the morning crew arrives. Adrian looked around the enormous room. Half the chairs were already stacked. Candles had burned low into melted pools of wax. Thousands of dollars of decorations now looked tired and meaningless beneath the fading light. Table. Do you know what the problem with money is? He asked quietly. Naomi gave a faint smile. I have honestly never had enough of it to study the problem. For the first time all night, Adrian laughed softly. A real laugh. Brief. Surprised. Almost unfamiliar to him. Then the sadness returned to his expression just as quickly. Money makes people louder, he said. Their greed. Their ego. Their emptiness. His eyes drifted toward the black card resting beneath the chandelier light. But somehow you became quieter around it. Naomi lowered her gaze. Because I know what it feels like to need things you cannot afford. Adrian studied her face carefully. No bitterness. No self-pity. Just truth. Pure and unpolished. It unsettled him more than manipulation ever had. Slowly, Adrian pushed the black card across the table toward her again. Take it. Naomi immediately slid it back. I cannot. Why? Adrian asked softly, though this time there was no challenge in his voice. Only genuine confusion. Naomi looked at him for a long moment before answering. Because if I use your money to fix my life, she said quietly, then one day I might start believing my dignity depends on someone richer than me. Adrian froze completely. The sentence hit him harder than any insult ever had. Naomi stood slowly from the table, clutching the small bundle of rescued roses gently against her chest. Good night, Mr. Castellano. Then she turned and walked away across the silent ballroom beneath fading golden light. Adrian remained standing beside the untouched black card, unable to move. Because somewhere between the chandeliers, the expensive champagne, and the endless performance of wealth, a tired maid with worn shoes had just said something no billionaire, politician, model, or socialite had ever managed to teach him. And for the first time in years, Adrian Castellano felt ashamed of how poor his own soul had become. 3 weeks later, snow covered most of Manhattan in soft white silence by the time Naomi Carter stepped out of the subway station carrying 2 grocery bags against her chest. The December wind cut sharply through the narrow Brooklyn streets, but Naomi barely noticed. Anymore. Cold had become part of life the same way exhaustion had. Final envelope nearly slipped from Naomi's trembling hands entirely. Full tuition coverage for Malcolm's remaining years at Columbia University. Housing included. Books included. Everything paid in full. Her mother pressed a shaking hand over her mouth. Who would do this? Naomi looked down at the final page inside the envelope. No company logo. No signature. Only a short handwritten note in clean black ink. The richest person in the room was never the one holding the black card. Naomi stared at the sentence while emotion tightened painfully inside her chest. She already knew who sent it. Across Manhattan, Adrian Castellano stood alone beside the enormous windows of his penthouse office, overlooking the glowing winter skyline. Snow drifted softly beyond the glass while untouched business reports covered the desk behind him. Vincent entered quietly carrying 2 glasses of scotch before stopping beside his friend. You really paid everything anonymously? Adrian nodded once. Vincent studied him carefully. You could have changed her entire life publicly. Why hide it? Adrian looked down at the city below for a long moment before answering. Because she deserved help, he said quietly. Not ownership. Vincent went silent. Adrian's reflection stared back at him faintly in the dark window glass. The same expensive suit. The same powerful name. The same city that once made him believe every heart could be purchased eventually. But now something inside him felt different. Lighter somehow. Human again. He remembered Naomi sitting beneath fading ballroom light eating chocolate cake like someone apologizing for being hungry. He remembered her giving away money she could not afford to lose. He remembered the sentence that shattered him completely. My dignity does not belong to someone richer than me. Adrian closed his eyes briefly. For years he had tested people with money because he thought wealth revealed character. But Naomi Carter had revealed something far more dangerous that night. A truth powerful enough to humble even a man like him. And somewhere between the chandeliers, the snow falling over New York, and a maid carrying rescued roses home to her mother, Adrian Castellano finally learned what dignity actually looked like.